Hey, Wade.
Good morning, Rob.
Good morning, Wade. And guess what? It's officially season 3 into the shadows of magick.tv, my dear friend.
Nice.
And you know what? We've made a lot of amazing friends. We've made a lot of amazing connections, a lot of amazing friendships with some amazing people in the past 2 seasons. And some of the new people that come in, we want to thank our dear friends at GOETIC Impressions for giving us these consecrated Belial medallions that they made just for us for magick.tv. Because, of course, those of you who know the backstory, Belial is the patron of magick.tv. But, you know, I'm trying to contain my excitement here because I got a question for you quickly, Wade. How do you feel about the idea of working with gods?
Overall, in my experience, it's really nice to be able to have somebody that you can say, well, this person is taking care of it for me. I've made my petition. I've made the proper sacrifices. I don't have to stress on whether or not I'm doing it right. I've turned it over to an expert. The downside of it is sometimes the answer is no, or you don't get exactly what you asked for. And a lot of times that's because there's something that you didn't know about, some other factor in play. So it's got its upsides and its downsides. I'm too much of a control freak myself to really do a lot of theurgy, but I have dabbled in the past and I've gotten good results.
Well, you know what? One amazing individual who I have learned so much from in the past half a year has taught me so much more about how to deepen my relationship with the patron gods. For those of you who know me, it started with Anubis. And I remember the time that I first came across this wonderful individual. He was talking about his relationship with the goddess Hekate. And I did my research and I found out he had a wonderful course called PGM, 50 Rights for 50 Nights. And I was already intrigued. But one day I see an advertisement that says, conjure Anubis today. And this sold me. Dragged me in to a rabbit hole, which changed my perspective on magic forever. It takes a lot to impress me, but I got to say, this individual is probably one of the best teachers I've had in decades. So without further ado, we are bringing our guest of honor to open up season 3 of magick.tv, none other than Jack Grayle. Hello, Jack.
Hello, Robert. Thank you so much for your generous introduction. It's much appreciated.
Welcome to magick.tv, Jack. And you know what? Like I said, there's such an interesting story of how our paths crossed and how everything happened. But, you know, I'm sure everybody wants to know right now, how on earth did it start? How on earth did Jack Grayle take the first step into what would become almost a magical palace of enlightenment, education, and empowerment?
You know, it's generous of you to ask, but I think my journey, like everyone else's who seek esoteric or alternate spiritual paths, comes from a point where you reach sort of a point where you don't want a mediated experience of the divine anymore. You know, because in Orthodox religion, you're not expected to directly interface with divine powers. They have people for that, right?
Yes.
They have, you know, I was raised Catholic, and it's not you know, directly interfacing with God most of the time. It's you pray to the priest will call upon you, Jesus will deal with God. There's a chain of a hierarchy, and most people are good with that. It's easy to forget. A lot of people don't want to have an unmediated experience of the divine. They're comfortable. But some people, like both of you, like me, like I suspect many of your viewers, over time, there gets to be this dissatisfaction, you know, where you're like, I would like to experience what it is to have a power in the room. Yeah, I would like to experience a divine vision. I would like to experience what it's like to feel like there's a hand in the darkness reaching out, and I take it with mine. I myself would like to feel that I can make change in my own life, but I just don't have to accept my circumstances, whatever they are, financial or romantic or health-wise or whatever. We all have a destiny, right? We all have a fate. But many of us feel at some point, I want to improve my odds. I want to twist this strand of fate. I don't want to be lonely anymore. I don't want to be broke. I don't want to have, this constant anxiety or depression or this addiction or whatever. And we do what we can in our mundane lives to fix those things. But there's a sense, since we are both, physical and spiritual creatures, you're like, all right, I've done all the physical things I can think of to improve my life. I want to now do the spiritual things. And Orthodox religion says, well, that's our job. That's our job. But for some people who watch this show, who take my class, who search it, these sort of searchers, they're like, no, I want to roll in that. I want to improve my life. I want to discover the unseen. I want to find out there's something after death. I want to find out how I can spiritually and materially improve my life through prayer, through magic, through divination, through sorcery, all these worlds. And that's the world that you're in the process of opening up to people too, right? What is out there? How can we do it? So I came to that point as well. And I was like, all right, I want to engage with this world that other people told is not for me. How do I do it? And that was the inception point for entering the world of, the esoteric, we'll call it.
Interesting. So if you don't mind me asking, because you have been a very elusive figure to me when it comes to doing my homework, because when I came across this book, I was so blown away, the Hekate, but I was like, who the hell is this guy? I never knew about you before 2022. But I was so blown away by the work. Then I looked up your videos and I was like, wait a minute. How come I'm only hearing about Jack Grayle now? And I couldn't dig up enough information about where did he start, what was original practices. So where did it all begin? Was it ceremonial magic, hoodoo, prayer? What was your first step into it all?
To be honest, I think I experienced what a lot of people experience. They're like drawn to this world, but they're like, where do I begin? You go to the bookstore or something, there's a book on runes, there's a book on tarot, there's a book on astrology, there's a book on Eastern meditation. There's so many different ways to go in, and there can be a sense of paralysis. It's like the Seven of Cups card in tarot. Like I've got too many choices. So you read one page of this and one chapter of that and watch a YouTube video of this and see, and there's a sense of it's too much, it would take me too long to do it. And I was at that point as well. I thought to myself, what I really need? I need a friend. I need someone who could be like a guard and a guide into this world, because the world can be intimidating too. You think, what if I get in too deep? What if I call something I can't make go away? Mm-hmm. And in magic, in the West, the best friend you can have is the goddess, the Titan, that some people call Hekate or Hekate or Hekate, right? And her role in myth is to escort, to guard and guide Persephone to the underworld and back again safely, and be her companion, right? And so a lot of us, when we go into the occult, we're entering another world. We're either going to the underworld for necromantic, chthonic magic, or the upper world for celestial, theurgy, or something like that. So I wanted a guard and a guide that could protect me and lead me. So I thought, I'll begin with forming a relationship with Hekate, because she knows the spirit world and I don't. So I'll leave it all to her, and she can guide me and she can protect me, and she'll be, lead me through these hazards and hopefully point me in the right direction. So that was my problem, and that was how I solved it.
Mm-hmm. So you just started with studying and learning about Hekate? Because because I'll humbly say this on the air. I only began my relationship with Hekate because of you. That was only like a year ago, and there's an interesting story with that. But how did it begin? Did you just read a book? Did you attend classes? Did you go to Greece or to Rome? About it? I mean, I'm so curious. Did you have a mentor who taught you in the Hecatean ways? I mean, what was it like for you?
I knew of Hekate because I had a background in theater. And Hekate appears in different plays throughout, in the plays of Shakespeare and other plays from the Renaissance period. And I knew that she appears as a witch queen. She's a very intimidating figure, right? But when you look back at her older myths, she's a very comforting figure. She's a torchbearer. Mm-hmm. And like any torchbearer, a torchbearer is meant to dispel the darkness. It's helped to guide people in a dangerous path safely. She's there in her myth to provide companionship,
Mhm.
and she illuminates what otherwise would be hidden. And that's reflected in the role she had in ancient Greece, because in ancient Athens, every year, most of the populace would go to the town of Eleusis, which is 10 miles outside of Athens, and undergo for about 10 days the Eleusinian mysteries. And while they were doing it, as they walked that 10 miles, they would be guided by two torchbearers. And one of them would be a person portraying Hekate, holding torches, and one of them would be a person holding torches portraying Dionysus. And they would guide through the darkness all these people who wanted to have an experience of the divine at Eleusis. Okay, so her role I knew because I began reading up on it, and I've been research, and it sounds like a lot of work, but it's really not, because there's not much written about her. Hekate was actually not one of the major goddesses in ancient Greece. She wasn't one of the 12 Olympians. She wasn't one of the ones who people had these massive temples for all over the world. Even today, if you go to Greece and look around and visit the holy sites, you'll see all kinds of shops with plaques and stelae about Aphrodite and Zeus and Athena. When I went to Greece, I didn't see one image of Hekate anywhere. She was always sort of a liminal, marginal goddess who was on the outskirts of things. She didn't have a bunch of funny myths about drama with her boyfriend or husband. She didn't have a bunch of legends about, scrapes she got into. Her main myth was that she helps Demeter find her lost daughter Persephone, and then she leads Persephone to the underworld and back again. And in her cult back then, she was placated at the new moon in order to keep away the spirits of the dead, because she was a psychopomp. She was a soul guide. And it was thought, like Hermes back in Greece, that if you died, you needed someone to guide you to the underworld, your soul, right? And so who better than the one who in the myth guides Persephone herself, the queen of the dead, to the underworld and back again. So they would give her, simple gifts, offerings of food or water at the new moon, at the crossroads. But because of that, because of her reputation as a guide of souls, a guide of the dead, it became part of her myth that she could control, that she was followed by, that she had a horde of restless spirits. Because some people, it was believed, die too soon. They die violently. They're unhappy with their fate. And she was like the shepherd of these souls. So that's how she came to be associated with magic, because a great deal of magic in the ancient world, both in the West and the East, was dealing with restless spirits and bidding them to do your, to help you out, making a pact with them, or ordering them to do something, asking them to give you luck or someone else bad luck, or, bring you love or help your business. So if you're going to deal with ghosts, who better to call upon than a shepherdess of ghosts? And Hekate is such a shepherd.
So you'd say she's like the queen of necromancers, wouldn't you say that?
That is that is her reputation, and that grew over time. It's apparent in the ancient Egyptian documents of the Greco-Egyptian magical papyri, from about 1700 years ago, and it's also in the plays of Shakespeare, written about 500 years ago, and it's certainly true now that her reputation for being a sort of a shepherd of ghosts and someone who can guide and protect people who deal with them, is still going strong after all this time.
Amazing. And okay, this brings me to my next question. By the way, Dr. Jeremy Weiss, one of our mainstays, is watching, saying this is terrific. Thank you, Dr. Weiss. You're a gentleman himself. Thank you so much for that.
Morning, doctor.
Is the rest of season 3. But I have the next question I'm going to ask you is synonymous with your work with Hekate is your known work for the PGM. Okay. No. And this is where I'm very thankful, because in the Blackthorn School, you have a fantastic program called 50 Rights for 50 Nights, where you make it very applicable, the practice of the PGM. Was your relationship with Hekate one of the things that triggered your study of the PGM?
Yes, absolutely. Anyone interested in the world of spirits or Hekate or magic right away comes up with a surprising result. Mm-hmm. Very few, there are a couple prayers to Hekate that come to us from Greece, just simple prayers like the Orphic hymns, or the hymns to Hekate and Janus, and a few others, the Homeric hymn to Demeter. But there's no magic of Hekate, meaning coercive magical spells where you're literally grabbing the strands of fate and changing them, bending them to improve your life. All the magical spells involving Hekate come from Africa, North Africa, Egypt, specifically Upper Egypt. We're talking Thebes, right? Which is now called Luxor. The magical spells conjuring Hekate are all basically a version of North African magic written about 1700 years ago by Egyptian priests. And by that time, around 300 AD, Egypt had gone 700, 800 years without an Egyptian pharaoh. It was a syncretic culture. It had had Persian pharaohs, it had had Greek pharaohs, it had had Roman emperors and overlords, and the people had integrated. It was like America today and many other countries. It was racially diverse, culturally diverse. There were hundreds of thousands of Jews living there. There was a Persian influence. There were Gnostics. There were Christians at the time. All kinds of people combined in this culture. And out of that culture came a form of magic which was deeply Egyptian in flavor, but called upon gods both Egyptian and Christian and Jewish and Hellenic and Roman. So you have these ancient spells, which will call, one of them will call upon Anubis, as you know, but then the next one will call upon Apollo, and then the next one might call upon Zeus or Persephone, and then there's many of them that call upon Hekate or Hermes, right? Or Typhon Set, the adversarial demon of ancient Greek mythology. So you have these wonderful spells, but it's like, wait a minute, these aren't Greek at all. But that's a good thing, because a lot of people drawn to Hekate, they're like, well, I wasn't born in Greece, right? Or I don't practice Hellenic reconstructionism, so I guess it's not for me. Or I'm not white, I'm not European. Well, I guess it's not for me. So there's a wonderful reassurance. All the best, most powerful Hekatean spells were written by African sorcerers in a culture that was intermingled Greek, Roman, Egyptian, Christian, Jewish, European, and African. It was a syncretic blend. So you don't have to just be Greek to pray to Hekate or Roman to cast this magical spell. They weren't, right? They weren't. They were. But as far as we can tell, these would have been indigenous Africans practicing Egyptian magic by conjuring Greek and Roman and Egyptian gods. So it's a very strong appeal to people who live in diverse cultures, right? Yes. Where you live and where I live. You're like, oh, well, they would have felt like us. And like us, they lived in a culture that was dealing with political upheaval, that was dealing with plagues, that was dealing with climate change, that was dealing with mass migration. They were dealing with all of a sudden great, changes.
Why does that sound familiar?
Yeah, right, it does. And it's so true. At the same time, it's easy to remember around 300 AD, when this was going on, you had a series of terrible emperors. They were just the worst. It was really poor. The empire was poorly run. Everyone admitted it. Things were falling apart. Mm-hmm. The infrastructure was collapsing because they didn't have enough taxes. They didn't have enough taxes because they were spending all their money on foreign wars. They were spending their money on foreign wars because there were huge influxes of migration into the Roman Empire from Germany and from the northern tribes. There was a huge influx of northern tribes because the people of the Russian steppes, like the Huns, were pushing them, driving them into Roman territory, and the Huns were on the move because of climate change. Mm-hmm. Their area was not as fertile as it was, so they had to seize new areas. So and there was disease and tax problems and financial shortfalls and corruption and political upheaval and revolutions and identity crisis too. Who's a Roman citizen if all these people who don't speak Latin are flooding our country, right?
Sounds very familiar.
Right? So there's a sense in reading the spells, they are very old and they come from a different country, but they feel familiar. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that drew me, aside from the fact that they're the ones that conjure Hekate magically.
Okay, wait. Before I go to the next question, one of our mainstay viewers, Heather, has a question for you, and that is, How did Hekate come to be associated with dogs? Now, as a fellow dog lover, I'd love to hear that from you.
Oh, what a great question. I have some people talk to me and say, I'm not a dog person. Can I still honor Hekate? the answer is this, and it's a great question, Heather. The answer is this. As you probably know, each of the gods has associations that are traditional associations with a certain plants and herbs, certain minerals and stones, certain animals, certain types of people, certain times of the day, right? All of these associations are hints at who they are. The idea is that they, the god or goddess, is sort of more present in certain things, which makes sense. I mean, Thomas Jefferson is more present in the Bill of Rights than he is in a roll of toilet paper, right? There are certain things that we ourselves, I am more present, in my book than I am in, some piece of paper a check that I wrote to, pay for my gas bill. So when we look at Hekate's associations, they tell us something about who she is. Her hour is the hour of midnight. Not really a specific time. It's really the moment between one day and the next. Her place in a city is usually the gate. And the gate isn't really part of the city. It's what divides what's in the city from without. Her place in a home is the doorway, where they would put the little box called a Hekatean. The doorway isn't really part of the house. It's the place between what's in the house and what's out. Her place outside the city is the crossroads, which again, a crossroads isn't really one road or the other. It's the place where those two roads meet, right? Her animal is the dog. The dog is a creature back then whose main function was to guard borders and boundaries. Caveat canem, beware the dog. The dog was meant to guard your property, to protect people from crossing the threshold and coming into what was yours, right? Each of these associations shows that she is clearly aligned with thresholds, borders, boundaries. And it becomes very clear that Hekate herself is over these things. And not only over them, she's often referred to as a titan. And the difference between a titan and a god is kind of subtle. A god is usually a power who's over something. Like Apollo can rule the sun, but a titan would be the sun itself. Poseidon is a god who rules the ocean, but Pontus or Hyperion is the ocean itself. Hekate is referred to as a titan very frequently. So she's a titan. What is she the titan of? The threshold, the boundary, the border, the place between. And what that means, just like the titan Gaia being the physical earth, I think we can say that Hekate is the border, the boundary, the space between. Geographically, the space between me and you, Robert, right now, that's Hekatean. Temporally, the time between right now and where I was an hour ago, that's a Hekatean threshold. I had to pass it to get from here to there. Subtle realms, the border between ignorance and knowledge, between inexperience and experience, between life and between death, between helplessness and empowerment. She is the boundary and the border between all things. And this is reflected because in the earliest writings we have of her, which are by Hesiod, the great Greek writer who in his Theogony celebrates all the gods, he provides a really generous description of her and says she is the one who determines whether the farmer's animals will give birth. She is the one who determines whether the athlete will win the game. She is the one who determines whether the army will win the war. And when you read it, you're like, what? Is she a goddess of fertility or of livestock?
She's a gatekeeper. She's a gatekeeper.
Right. And then you look at it, you're like, no, wait, there's a threshold with all of these. For the calf to be born, it has to pass the threshold of the cow's body. For an army back then to win a battle, they had to break through the shield wall of the opposing army. For an athlete to win an event, they had to run past the finish line. If she's maintaining the boundaries, she's the gatekeeper. She decides who gets past. And so for those of us who want to cross the boundary from the mundane to the esoteric, the occult, the divine, the spiritual, or if we want to go to the underworld to contact the dead, or if we want to pray to ascend to a higher level, theurgically, to transform our souls, then why not call upon the guard and guide whose job is to open the threshold or close it?
Wow. And yeah, we have
And that could
Alexander.
apply to pretty much anything at that point that you're doing, because in any operation, there's always going to be a tipping point from when you're getting like diminishing returns until you hit that point, and then it starts to kind of go, collect momentum going the other way. There's always that tipping point, and that's the hardest point to get past.
Yeah, she's the road opener, in other words. She could be the road opener. So yeah,
So
we have
true.
Alexander Carson saying, hi, Jack and Robert. If I'm not mistaken, she's a classmate of mine. Hello, Alexandra.
Great
All right,
to
now,
see you, Alexander.
I mean, staying on point, though, because I'm just so much I want to ask. The next thing I want to ask about is this, the Hekate, which is, when did you get the marching orders from Hekate that, all right, Jack, you're doing this? Because this is magic. This is art. This is a masterpiece. Wade and I talk time and time again about certain authors who write in ways where you just want to take the book. Although I'm not saying they're bad authors, but you want to take the book and you want to throw it against the wall. This book had the polar opposite. The minute I started reading it, I was like, no, I want this book. It was so clear. It was so easy to understand. It was so digestible. And it was so full of passion. So what inspired the creation of the Hekate?
Thank you. Thank you very much for your kind words. I really appreciate that. And for anyone, which would be most people, that haven't seen my book, the goal when I wrote my book is, oftentimes in the ancient world, if you wanted a special relationship with a god, you had to go through an initiation, right? If you wanted a special relationship with Persephone and Demeter, you went to the Eleusinian mysteries. If you wanted a special relationship with Osiris and Isis, you go to Egypt and go through the mysteries of Osiris. You could go through the mysteries of Dionysus, and people would go to multiple ones. They were like pilgrims. But afterwards, you would say, I've been initiated into the mysteries of Dionysus. And it meant that you two were tight now. Like you had undergone an ordeal and you had come through it. And now there was an open channel between you. They were one of your patron gods, right? And so as a Westerner who's been born 1700 years after these mysteries stopped being celebrated, I wanted to be initiated with Hekate, but there wasn't a tradition that was available to me to do that. And so I wrote this book as a form of self-initiation where I could come up with, a series of workings and spells and offerings and ordeals to offer myself to her. And I wanted to make the book available. So if there was anyone like me, they could also do the same, even if they weren't part of a coven or a bigger group or an organization that provided an initiation. So the book was meant to be a threshold leading to the goddess of thresholds, right? A window into the power of Hekate, a door. And I wish I could say that I had a direct channel to Hekate, and she talks to me, but the book was also my search to connect with her, my quest to make contact with her, my love letter to her. It was a way I wrote it not because I was channeling her, but because I was trying to draw her near. So the spells in it are very much in some ways like love poetry, meant to attract the interest of someone and convince them that you're enamored of them and you want to have a relationship with them. And you're calling them, say, be close to me. I'm serious about this. This is something I want. I'm in it for the long term. Become part of my life and I'll become part of yours. And so that was what led to the writing of the book.
It was like your Taj Mahal to Hekate.
Yeah.
Have you ever you read Crowley, correct?
I've read some of Crowley. Yes.
Have you ever Liber Astarte, where he describes the process of becoming a priest of any given god, where you send them like a formal, like the ritual evolves as you start off like a formal, like you're sending an email to Microsoft or something, a nice formal letter, and it starts off that way, and then it gradually becomes more and more intimate until you can almost assume the god form yourself, sort of like getting the CEO of Microsoft to show up at your house and just kind of hang out and play cards. But the ritual itself evolves, and this sounds like the very far along that particular evolution.
It absolutely is, and I'm going to go read it. I just realized I haven't read that. I would love to read that. Crowley, at his most rapturous, is one of the most lyrical and sensual writers in occultism. I would love to read his writings on that.
Now, Jack,
It's interesting stuff.
Yeah, I want to ask you something, Jack, since you're so versed on dealing with gods. I personally have had some people that I know, especially here in my organization in the Philippines, who have built relationships with their own patron gods of their own choice, similar to like what you've done with Hekate. But I have noticed one common thing, which would be like the initial stage when you make that initial contact with the god. It's like meeting the love of your life for the first time. It's like you feel so connected. You feel so, oh my God, this is what I've been looking for. This is what's been lacking in my life. And then comes the darkness. It's like they were just plucked out. And it's not that they're ignoring you or you're not worthy. It's like, where did you go? And several people that I've worked with have had this phenomenon happen. They've erected altars to Artemis or to Selene, and they've had this strong, powerful relationship at first. Then it's just like they were blinked out of existence and they're crying and screaming, where did you go? I want to talk to you. I need you in my life. And eventually, after some time, they do come back. But I wanted to ask, has this happened to you with Hekate? And if it has, why? What's the purpose of it? I don't understand.
You know, that's beautifully said. And that's the problem many of us encounter, right? When you're trying to form a relationship with an unseen being, is that oftentimes there's this excited spike at the beginning, and then it kind of plateaus, and then it drifts away. It becomes dull or frustrating. You feel like no one's there. You're like, what? What happened? And I think it's worth remembering this. In Greek myth, there's several myths about people trying to grasp a god. In the Iliad and Odyssey, Homer writes a description of the attempt to grab the god Proteus. And they grab him, and he's one thing at first, and he turns into another, and he turns into another, and they have to keep holding him because he keeps changing shape. This god of the sea, he changes from fish to fowl to animal to whatever, and they say keep holding on to him, don't let go. Eventually, he'll become himself and say, "What do you want?" And it's also reflected in this myth of there's an old strange myth about Dionysus, where Hera decides to destroy Dionysus, so she sends the Titans. And the Titans try to destroy him, and they succeed. But as they work at him, he becomes a bull, and he becomes a bee, and he becomes a serpent, and he keeps changing shape. And I think the gods are like that. They don't have bodies, right? And they change shape. And I think as soon as we grasp them in one form, oh, Hekate is the witch queen. I have a relationship with the witch queen. My spell worked, and I really felt the energy was great last night. Well, a month later, that witch queen form of hers may seem kind of hollow. And I think the idea is not to keep doing the same thing, hoping to get different results, right? To remember they're mutable, just like we are. On a Monday morning, I'm a very different person than I am on a Friday night, right? I'm a different friend on the first weekend we meet than 3 years in. We all are, right? We contain multitudes, and the gods are like that too. So I think the trick is, just like they were told in ancient myth, don't let go. It will change shape. Don't let go. The trick is not to become disheartened, not to think, well, she went away. She can't go away. She's the embodiment of liminality. It surrounds us. Us thinking Hekate went away is like a fish thinking water went away because the current changed, right? It doesn't happen. You can't see it, but it's there, and she's always there. So if something feels hollow, if it consistently feels like I'm just yelling in the darkness, then she's changing form. Change with her, right? Intuitively, ask yourself, what draws me? Maybe you say, well, I've been doing necromantic work with her for 3 months, but I've been curious about this thing called the Chaldean Oracles, which is like a theurgic, celestial version of her. Maybe I'll get a book on that and honor her in that form, very different than her necromantic Egyptian form. Or you say, after a while, maybe after 6 months, you're like, all right, well, I've done that, but it doesn't feel much. Well, wait a minute. I've heard that she's referencing the Orphic hymns. So I'll get a copy of the Orphic hymns. I'll use those. And you know what? There's a tendency to kind of be, monogamous with her in a way where you're like, oh, wait a minute. If she was paired up with Dionysus in the Eleusinian Mysteries, why don't I call upon both of them, right? They clearly are kind of sync up at some level. They're both torchbearers. All of a sudden, that might reinvigorate your practice. I'm now calling upon Dionysus in the Orphic hymns as well as Hekate. I feel excited. There's a different energy going on here. And maybe after a while, even that feels like it's tiring out. You intuitively think, I'm really drawn to, I don't know, tarot. I'd love to know more about it. Instead of thinking, I'm going to drop my Hekatean practice and study tarot. It's a matter of thinking and even telling Hekate, I'm going to search for you in the tarot. I'm drawn to tarot. Which card is most like Hekate? Which spread is most like Hekate? If Hekate is the guardian of thresholds, what are the thresholds of tarot, right? Or astrology, perhaps. What is the star, the dog star, Sirius, is associated with Hekate? Switch to stellar magic. This idea, it's like a relationship, right? If we meet someone and we're excited and we have a great date, go to a good restaurant, take a walk in a beautiful place, we feel invigorated. But if every date we go to the same restaurant and eat the same meal and go on the same walk, 6 months in, we're both going to be like, who else is out there? Because been there, done that. So to try to keep it fresh is part of the challenge. And it's actually a way to honor them and their mutable nature. It's not.
The gods don't get jealous. Like, example, if I'm a patron of Anubis, because like I'll share with you privately about that, about at first why I had apprehensions in working with Hekate, because I already swore myself to Anubis. And when I started getting my messages from Hekate, I'm like, hey, wait a minute. I'm a very one-dimensional kind of guy. If I commit to something, I commit to it. I even asked some friends, was Hekate sent by Anubis to help me? Or is she trying to buy me off of him? So from your point of view, do they get jealous? Or are they completely okay? Like, you can talk to Helios today and you can talk to Set tomorrow.
It's a great point. And a lot of people bring that up. It comes, I think, we come from a culture that's monotheistic. So you come from a place with the idea of honoring other gods is automatically a sign of disloyalty and disrespect, right? And the kind of exception of that would be, Catholicism, where you can venerate Mary and honor saints and things like that. But there's just one God. So, right, if you say, well, Hekate is, my goddess, or Aphrodite, or whatever, to begin honoring another god, it can trigger those feelings of, well, now I'm straying, right? Now I'm basically two-timing this god to be able to be with this one. It's a contemporary cultural problem. It's not a traditional problem. They were inclusive in the old world. People would be initiated in the mysteries of Osiris, of Dionysus, of Demeter and Persephone, without any sense that this was somehow dissing the others. But people would also develop what they considered a kind of a limited group of patron gods. The father who ran the shop, Hermes, might be his patron god, or Vulcan, if he was worked with fire. A soldier, it would be Mars, probably. A father might also have Jupiter. A woman might have Aphrodite and Hestia, the goddess of the hearth, of the happy home. And you would have sort of a smaller stable of gods that were in your home, your home shrine. And that home shrine would also have an image of your ancestor, an ancestral acknowledgement that you acknowledge your ancestors. It would have a little serpent to indicate that you celebrate the good spirit of your land, whether you own vineyards or a tiny home. And it would have a little picture of the lares, the good spirits of the household that bring luck and good fortune, So you might have multiple little gods in your temple area, in your home altar, and you would not consider that to be inappropriate. I think for those who practice magic and sorcery, it makes sense that we're clear in our heads who are my main gods and what is their main function, And I think if there's sort of any confusion, we use divination to find out the difference. Like, say I've used Hekate when I do some necromantic rites successfully 3 times. I feel solid. But all of a sudden I'm drawn to Anubis. I'm like, oh, Anubis, I want to do an Egyptian working. And he's a psychopomp too. He guards the threshold between the horizon, between the upper and the lower worlds. He's very Hekatean, a black dog who deals with the dead. He's the embalmer of Osiris and all that. I'm drawn to that. Well, instead of just like trying to do it on the side and hope she doesn't notice, maybe it'd be worthwhile to do a ritual to Hekate. Say, hey, I want to do this ritual with Anubis. I'm drawn to it. And I know that there's no myth of you denying your followers the right to honor other gods. So I'm assuming that this is a healthy thing. So I'm going to do it. unless I light this candle to you. If there's something that's inappropriate about this working, let the candle blow out or send me a dream to tell me tonight. Otherwise, I'm doing the Anubis rite tomorrow. Right?
Wow.
You give them you draw, or you just say, I'm going to draw a card from this tarot deck. If it's something that I shouldn't do, make the card reflect that. You put it in their lap. You tell me. This is your world. You tell me. You let them have a voice in it. And if there's no objection, you say, all right, I gave you a chance. Now I'm going to do this thing.
Wait,
when you were talking about the gods going away, like you're working with them and then suddenly they're not there, that reminded me of a particular parable about a line of footsteps in the sand. And I'm thinking it might be like a universal experience with any particular spirituality, that it's a matter of focus and perception, not necessarily of yours, but of theirs. That maybe they're too close. If you're looking for them in the temple and they're kind of sitting on your back, that it could be a sign of success that you don't see them in the temple.
It's an absolute universal. We even know Alexander the Great, the Macedonian who conquered the known world. He came down from Macedon, conquered Greece, headed east, and conquered up to 200 miles of the Ganges River. Conquered Egypt, conquered Persia, conquered what's now Afghanistan and Pakistan, just conquered everything along the way. And one of the ways he did it was he hammered his initial cities he visited so hard. He destroyed them so completely and sold the people that fought him into slavery afterwards and leveled their cities, that when he would approach a city after that, they would just throw the arms in front of him and say, we surrender. He didn't have to fight toward the end because his reputation was such. But he always remembered what he had done, and he was uneasy about it. And when he suffered bad luck, he would say, that's the god Dionysus angry at me because I destroyed those cities early in my career. So even Alexander the Great, the greatest emperor and warrior of the classical world, was uneasy and had a feeling the gods could abandon him or work against his interests. Even he was insecure to some degree, and he was the least insecure human of antiquity, right? And say he was the one that conquered Egypt, and it became the Ptolemies became the overlords of Egypt, and it began to be a syncretic culture with Hellenic influences. So yes, I 100% agree. Just because we feel they're not there does not mean they're not there, right? That's an us problem. It's not a them problem.
Interesting. Wow, that answered so many of my questions for the last year that I'll save for off camera. So, Jack, for segment 1, that was more than I've ever expected. Thank you so much for that. We're going to go to segment 2 now, which is the Jon Stewart segment, current events. And I'm going to start this off. The very first video I ever saw of your good-looking face, you were wearing a nice suit, and you were saying something about, people keep asking, did Hekate contact me? A dog appeared. Is it Hekate? An owl appeared. Is it Hekate? And you were leaning towards the subjectivity that if it means that she did to you, it did. And I love that about you, because you didn't debunk anyone, say, hey, you're full of shit, don't bother with me. You were so warm and open about it that people can have their own experiences. So from your point of view as a teacher, as an educator, as a writer, what's your take on the current stance of magic, occultism, and even the Hekate current in modern day? Do you see that we're coming to, for all you know, a new golden age of Hekate worshippers, or are we in the wrong direction? We'd love to hear your take on this.
What I think, Robert, is that we all know the membership in Orthodox religions is declining steadily, and it seems to be speeding up, right? And not just churches, but organizations of every type, sports organizations, orchestras, political organizations, unions, Masonic lodges, everything. Participation is dropping, and especially in churches. But that doesn't mean that people aren't still hungry for connection with each other or hungry to find meaning spiritually. So I think as we see decline in membership of Orthodox religions, there's a corresponding upsurge in people interested in non-traditional spiritual paths that have an unmediated experience of the divine. And that may be tarot cards, or it might be runes, or it might be, angelic, working with angels directly, or it might be magic or sorcery or ancient gods, so that kind of thing. So I think as one goes down the other one goes up. So yeah, no, I think the increased visibility and the increased participation is going to continue, especially as these times we're in are increasingly uncertain, with between disease and AI and political wars, inflation all over the place, uncertainty economically and politically and everything like that. So I think it will continue. The question is, will it, for those people caught up in the surge of magic, occultism, all that, will it take a healthy form, something that feels like an actual relationship that makes you feel more connected with this world we're in and with ourselves and with other people? Or will it just take the form of something, it's a style, I wear a shirt with pentagrams on it, or I, hang an evil eye from my window because it's a pretty design, or I, pay someone to occasionally tell my fortune. I don't know. Will it be something meaningful, or will it just be a surface thing that's more of a lifestyle choice, right? And that, I don't know. I mean, a lot of people don't. That's a wonderful thing you provide here, is a glimpse into a transformative practices that people can connect with. So I really respect what you're doing here, because you provide people with windows of opportunity to engage with mysticism and occultism and esotericism in ways that are transformative and real, as opposed to just, something, a t-shirt to wear or a tattoo, on my neck and move on.
Well, very honored.
This is something I love so much about June is, Pride Month is a whole different thing. But what I love is that for 1 month out of the year, everybody is forced to acknowledge that other things exist. Mm-hmm. So it kind of that sort of opens the door, like, oh yeah, it kind of breaks everyone out of their solipsistic mindset, and like, oh wait, there's other things going on in the world. Whether they like it or don't like it doesn't matter. They have to acknowledge that this is going on. And I think that, you see a lot more alternative spirituality, especially in the mainstream, where people are just acknowledging, like, oh yeah, well, my neighbor does this and this, and and they have rituals in their backyard or whatever, and they just kind of accept that this happens and move on. They've gotten past the fear of it and gotten to the point that it's just like, oh yeah, they do these things. So I think that's a good trend, and I hope it continues to evolve that way, to where society isn't like, well, religion is something that just happens in the church on Sundays from 8 to 10, and then we go and we have dinner down at Denny's, and that's the end of it for the until next week. This is something that is getting to be all the time, which is nice. I like that we're evolving that way.
It's true, but it's a slow evolution in the United States for certain, and it's unfortunate. Like if you go to Europe, if you go in Central Europe, you mention occultism, they think of alchemists and Paracelsus and Newton and all these brilliant experiments and stuff. You go to Scandinavia and mention occultism, they think of, of these great philosophers with adversarial theories, and things like that. But if in the United States, if you mention occultism, they think of Manson, Mendez brothers, drug dealing psychopath. Like, it doesn't have an association with a healthy spiritual path. It has association with criminality and things like that. And so I think we have a long way to go in the US to try to, and it helps, when a pop star creates a song about Hekate, or when a popular TV show shows teenagers being empowered by calling upon magical forces. I think in some ways that provides a positive model. But there's also plenty of horror movies showing people being sucked down to hell for casting a spell that that counteract that. So it probably evens out in the end.
Yeah. What more?
I was working at a pagan bookstore when The Craft came out.
Yeah.
And I was working at a pagan bookstore in Oakland, and oh my God, the people that came in there, they had gone to see the movie, and they were in there and they were looking for the book with the moving pictures and all the spells that you could do in it and all of the amazing stuff that was in there. And I would just go and get them a copy of John Dee's True and Faithful with the old Elizabethan typeset and the long F's and the bastardized Latin. Here you go. And it looks like the book in the movie, and it's got the woodcuts, and they would look at it and be like, and you just watch the light go out of their eyes. And you're like, perhaps a young master would like something less advanced. And they're like, oh, okay.
It's you mentioned that because sometimes people want to be in the occult, but they don't want to put the work into it. The word that I've learned from Jack, that if you really want to tap into these powers, it's devotion. You have to be devoted to it in one way or the other. You have to be devoted to your practice, devoted to the God you choose. You can't just be in it for the lulls, for the looks. This is a lifestyle. This is something you're going to take into yourself. And that's really one thing that I'm so inspired by what I've written with Jack. So, Jack, thank you so much for that input. Because now we're going to go to the third and most eager segment of the show, Occultex. This is where you, Jack Grayle, teach us something. And I'm having my fingers crossed here because I know you've got a huge bag of holding of knowledge in that mind of yours. Anything you want about the occult, sky's the limit. We want to hear, what do you have for us today? It could be a ritual, it could be a prayer, it could be a song. You name it, we'll take it.
My mind is more like one of those devices you draw a picture with and shake and it goes blank. You know, that's more like mine.
Etch-a-sketch.
I will, if I had to share any insights, it'd be pretty basic, but they'd be like this. It is true that you have to be like, commit to get results, because you get out of it what you put into it, just like any relationship or any skill or sport or anything. It's not an exception to that. But I think the thing that people forget when they're early on, like flipping through that book for the first time in a bookstore, if I could tell someone like that something, I'd be like, look, to enter this world, you don't have to spend a lot of money, and you don't have to have golden swords or jade necklaces or silver pentagrams or all these, you don't have to have all this magical stuff. And my book has things in it where it often says, use the skull of a dog or its image, like use the this or its image. And the idea is that not everyone can, have a bunch of, bones lying around the house, and not everyone has the money or the opportunity. A lot of people are trying to develop their magical selves when they live at home with their parents, or they have a spouse who's not supportive, or they work 2 jobs and have kids at night. They've only got 15 minutes a night to do something. That person is not going to be spending 6 months in isolation praying to an angel. That person's not going to get a sword consecrated in the Mass of St. John, with golden words inscribed on the hilt. That person's not going to have an ebony wand of hazel that was cut on the morning of they're not. But that doesn't mean they can't enter this world, because all those sacred tools are ancillary to the ultimate sacred tool, which is ourselves. We're sacred. I was talking to a woman just yesterday, my friend Deborah Greer, who's the 3rd generation practice of Macumba from Brazil. And she talked to her mother about what she should teach her students, because she teaches them. The mother said, don't forget to tell them, she's talking about altars. The mother said, don't forget to tell them that the home is also an altar, and the self, the body, is also an altar too. And that's from a woman who's practiced Macumba her whole life and learned it from her mother in an unbroken tradition in Brazil. And it's a beautiful reminder that however much a wand may be magical, if it's consecrated, this hand is sacred too, in all of our hands. As much as a phylactery can be consecrated, this tongue, is also a phylactery in all of our tongues. This heart, this flesh, whatever. If a branch of yew or a black dog or a piece of obsidian can be an epiphany of Hekate, well, then I can be an epiphany of Hekate too. And you can be an epiphany of Anubis. And someone who conjures Aphrodite can become an epiphany of her as well. So I think the first thing to share is that don't forget, right now, wherever you are, you have what you need to honor the gods, to conjure spirits, and to make the magic happen. To the extent that you may invest your time and resources increasing your odds of having a meaningful connection by collecting that stone or that tool or doing this ritual or this tattoo or that, magical garment, all the better. But you have what you need, okay? What matters is the desire to do this thing. What matters is the commitment to do this thing. What matters is the actual follow through to do this thing. And that's just a matter of your will, right? Here's the second thing I would tell people. Because of if you've been brought up in an Orthodox religion, like I assume we were, there's hardwired into us a sense of calling upon the gods with a sort of an apologetic tone, like, hate to bother you, sorry to interrupt you. I know I'm not exactly the best possible person to be reaching out to you, but if you don't mind, could you please, right? That tone, which is entirely appropriate if you're part of an Orthodox religion. But when you practice these worlds we're talking about, you're not, unless you're doing very certain forms of work that are highly, for instance, Christian. But if you were to call upon the traditional God, the ancient gods of Egypt or Greece or Rome, right? The second thing I'd like to share is you should do it with confidence. And people say, well, how can I do it with confidence? I've never called upon Anubis before. Be confident. Be confident. It's like asking someone out on a date. You approach them and you're apologetic and they can't hear your whispery voice. Hey, would you mind talking to that lady? You're not gonna go anywhere with you, right? Be confident. Take a deep breath. Find a moment, find a space. We have some privacy, whether it's indoors or out. Do what you can do. Light a candle. Take a moment to inhale the scent. Sort of expand your presence. Say to yourself, I'm going to reach out to this power, and I'm worthy of this power. And whether I feel anything or don't, once I do it, I'll have done something that I've never done before. And this power will hear me, because what you call hears you, and what you call forth comes. It comes every time. What happens next, once it comes, is the outcome of how you called it and what you have to offer and what you want in the first place. Okay? We have their number. So the sense of confidence, and if you don't have it, fake it till you make it, right? It's anything else. Assume a virtue if you have it not. That's a line from Shakespeare's Hamlet, but it works well in magic too. And then, even if you don't have a ritual script, if you haven't had time to print out something, the third thing I'd like to share is triplicity. Repeat things 3 times. I made the same mistake a lot of people who take my classes make, that oftentimes they'll just read it once. And when you read something once, or when you say something extemporaneously once, inevitably you fumble over your own words, you sort of stall out. I lost my place on the page. I tripped over the magical voices that are in here. My voice was kind of got choked up at one point. It petered out at the end. Do it a second time. Do it a third time. There's a wonderful line. It occurs several times in the magical Greek Egyptian magical papyri. They'll list a spell done by an Egyptian priest, and they'll say at the bottom, if you do this 7 times and get no result, go on to the next part. You're like, what? Even these ancient Egyptian magical priests that were initiated and did this magic full time, they might do it 7 times and get no result? Yes, because they were human too. You imagine this Egyptian priest standing on his roof, facing the rising sun, calling upon Abrasax and Eao, and reciting all these magical vowels and letters and words. And after first time, he's like, you're going to do it a second time, do it a second time, do it a third time, do it a 4th time, thinking to himself, man, there's just nothing happening. 5th time, 6th time. I find that incredibly encouraging. Do it several times. Ask repeatedly. And as you do, feel your voice grow stronger. Feel your breath come in lower. Feel yourself be more comfortable in your own skin. Whether you're making it up or reading it, let yourself integrate the words until they begin to come naturally. Then you can add some force and vigor and meaning to them. Mean what you say. Say it with some enthusiasm. We tend to forget that the word enthusiasm comes from a Greek phrase that literally means like the God steps in. You're inhabited by a power and a force that's full of vigor, and we can invite in that enthusiasm by deep breath, by full voice, by repeating it, and adding in certain moments to clap 3 times to sort of shock the system, to ring a bell, to stamp one's foot. The PGM is filled with performative aspects. These sorcerers, with their instructions to bellow like a bull, and then bark like a dog, and then make a sound like a hawk's cry, and then stamp on the floor, and then whisper, and then exhale all your breath. And then, and you look at it and you're like, oh my God, if someone did all of these, imagine it. Imagine it. We're too conservative with our magic. It's too minimal. You might say a phrase while standing there once and then turn out the lights. Nothing happened. Well, nothing happened because you half-assed it. Whole-ass it, right? Do it. Do it. Do it bigger. Do it braver. Do it more fully. Give it your whole heart. So many people, they're more enthusiastic watching their favorite sports team on TV than they are doing magic in their room. Give it the same excitement and sense of vitality that you would give it if your favorite team scored, in a final tournament. So those are three things that I would like to share that anyone can do to be comfortable in yourself, to be confident, to keep in mind that you're holy, to be vigorous and vital and enthusiastic and imaginative and creative. And the last thing that I'll add is this. What happens when we call upon the gods is we receive, if we're successful, one of two things. One, hopefully we get what we're hoping for, whatever that is, what we ask for. But two, we often receive epiphanies. An epiphany is an appearance of the god. And everyone kind of expects an epiphany of a glowing humanoid figure saying, "Thank you for conjuring me. I agree to give you what you want." Hardly anyone gets those. I've never got one of those in my life. But what you often get is epiphanies through the natural world, right? You conjure Hekate, you hear the bark of a dog. You conjure Anubis, and perhaps you see a black animal cross your path as you go home. You conjure the power of the sun, and all of a sudden the light flashes in your eyes, blinding you momentarily. These epiphanies, they can be animal, or they can be sound you hear, or they can be something you feel internally. These epiphanies are signs that the gods have heard us and that they're with us, okay? But the epiphanies are individualized based on where we live and how we live and who we are. So to an ancient Greek, a black dog barking at their boundary could well have been an epiphany of Hekate, and still could. But I talked to a woman last night who said, I did a Hekatean working, and afterwards on my walk home, I saw a lunar moth, something I'd never seen before. And the next time I did a working, I saw one again. To that woman, the lunar moth absolutely could be an epiphany of Hekate, even though it doesn't appear in any ancient Greek text or any Egyptian spell. Wherever she lives, a lunar moth is a nocturnal, liminal creature that its very name summarizes, references the beauty of the moon, and Hekate has many lunar associations. That woman was capable of witnessing an epiphany and understanding it to be one, even when it occurs nowhere in magical literature, and she was right to do so. And so each of us can develop our own library of epiphanies for these divinities. Every time I call Typhon Set, I hear an ambulance in the distance. Well, that's an epiphany. You won't find it. You won't find it in ancient things. Of course you won't, because I don't live in ancient Egypt.
Wow. I'm blown away. That was the kickoff that we wanted for season 3, Jack. From the bottom of my heart.
That was something.
Oh,
like being able to recognize the closures on each one.
I'm just blown away. Thank you so much for this. And before we wrap up this episode, I wanted to allow you to share any upcoming events, classes, workshops, books you have, so that people watching the show would know about it. I know you have an upcoming book signing in LA soon.
Yes, I'm going to be at the Crooked Path Apothecary in Burbank, California, the weekend of I think it's on July 15th, which is a Saturday. So if you're interested, come that afternoon to the Crooked Path Apothecary in Burbank, and I'd love to meet you and sign your book. I do have classes, as you know, Robert, that are offered through an wonderful online organization called the Blackthorn School. And so anyone interested in my classes could enter my name and search on Google for the Blackthorn School. I'll be doing another 13-week class on the ancient sorcery of Hekate in July. I'll be starting a class on the magic, a year-long class on the magic of the PGM, the Greco-Egyptian magical papyri, in August. And in October, I'll be renewing my class on the ancient magical praxis found in the Iliad and the Odyssey and the writings of Homer in October. So if anyone's interested in any of those things, and also I have a new edition of the Hekatean coming out probably within the next 2 months at the end of summer. Ooh. And that book can be ordered if anyone's interested at miskatonicbooks.com. So
very proud owner of mine. Mine was given to me by Hekate herself, but that's a story for another day. I will write about that. But Jack, we're going to put you in the waiting room. But thank you so much for starting season 3 with us. Once again, that's Jack Grayle, who started Into the Shadows, Magick.TV season 3. Blown away. I am like overloaded by everything I've learned. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Great to meet you guys.
I'm going to move you off the stream. Damn, Wade. I think we bit off more than we can chew. If this is an omen of what's going to happen for the rest of the season,
Start chewing.
damn.
Start chewing. I love that. I love that getting to that point. You're like, I'm in over my head. I'm going to start swimming a little harder.
Let's go. So that being said, check out Jack Grayle. If you can find a copy of the Hekate, sell a kidney for it because it's worth 2 of them. And now I'm going to announce who our next special guest is going to be. Please don't leave, Jack, because we're going to want to thank you after this. Check it out. Good night, everyone. This is Robin Wade from magick.tv Season 3, now officially launched.
Asmodeus, Satanas, Lucifer,